Now, when it comes to deciding the best sports car ever made, it's pretty difficult and there's a lot of argument, but I truly believe that the Mark II to 2.5 Mazda MX5 is the best sports car ever made, and here's why. Now, to be considered the best, a car has to consist of multiple things in different categories to overall come out on top. And some of those things will include one, aftermarket support, two, the actual performance of the car, three, the availability of the car, four, the reliability. Now let's delve into all those categories and really assess where the MX5 sits in them. Starting off with availability. Now, the MX5 is a very accessible car to every age range and they're cheap. You can pick them up for next to nothing. For example, now, of course, this is my first car, my 2002 MX5 1.6. But when I say available, this is what I mean. We have three others. These aren't actually mine. These are my mate's Liam's, who I share my unit with. But these are his cars. And as you can see, yes, they've all got something wrong with them at the minute. But like I say, very available. And if you don't know, probably about a year ago now, I had a Icon Edition Mark 2.5, which I ended up selling. It was a flip car, made decent money on it, but it just shows you how accessible they were. At the age of 18, I had two of these cars, which just speaks for itself. And when the option for a sub £5,000 budget is sort of, you're looking at Nissan Micras costing that much nowadays. Maybe not all the way up to the £5,000 mark, but I am including modifications in that price, because to find a decent MX5 with minimal rust, you're probably looking at about £2,500, which, in all fairness, for a car is not a bad price. And the reason I'm only saying Mark II and 2.5 MX5s for this is the Mark 1s, they're just extortionately priced at the minute. For a decent one of those, you're £8,000 plus, and there's just not as many around. The Mark 2.5, I believe they made over 500,000 of these cars, so they're very easy to get your hands on. Now let's jump into the reliability of these cars, which probably isn't helped by having these three sat here. But just for the video's sake, let's go after what's actually wrong with these. We bought this one, someone had tried tinkering around with the ECU, it's locked, the car doesn't start now, basically gets no power, so it needs a new ECU. But that wasn't the car's fault, that was down to the owner not really looking after the car and trying to fiddle with it. This car still runs perfectly, but it's an ex-Copart car, so as you can see, that wheel is coming out this way, and you come around this side, and that one's straight, so we do need to swap the suspension components from this car to make it a decent one, and take the red mohair roof off because we have a black one. But that car is perfectly fine once we get that issue sorted. And now the final car, which is how I met Liam, because of course we had the same colour car. This has a knocking bottom end. And of course that's because Liam decided not to service the car for however many thousands of miles. So the bearings just shit themselves, and there's no point saving the engine. And which we'll move on to later in this video, the rust issues with these cars, because this one is quite crusty. But yes, back to the reliability of these cars. Now, my car is nearing 30,000 miles. I bought it on 13,000. All I've had to do to this car is, I believe, service it, so oil and filter, and the rocker cover gasket is leaking, but that's because I removed mine and I didn't take it, and I didn't buy myself a new one to fit when I took the rocker cover off, which is why it's leaking a little bit. But other than that, no issues whatsoever. And you will see that a lot of these cars on the likes of Marketplace, eBay, Auto Trader, they're all reaching fairly high mileage for the UK now. They're on anywhere from 100 to 150,000 miles. I've seen a fully restored one at a show, which was on, I believe, 180,000 miles, and the person had had it new from the day it left the factory. So across the Mark II, engine-wise, you have the 1.6, which is just your bog standard 1.6, no valve, variable valve timing, just a fairly simple 16-valve engine. Whereas the two end cars there, they have variable valve timing, which there's no issues with the cars whatsoever. They perform just the same. Well, performance-wise, they have roughly a 30 horsepower increase
over the 1.6, but there's nothing that really goes wrong with these engines. And if you get a Mark II rather than a Mark 2.5, you get a 1.8 without the variable valve timing, which is the BP4W, which every MX5 owner describes as God's engine because they are an incredible piece of kit. And obviously, reliability isn't just down to the engine, but whether it be the rest of the drivetrain through the diff, gearbox, or whether you're on about suspension components, nothing really seems to go wrong on these cars. Now, of course, you have the wear and tear on items such as track rods, brake pads, brake discs. That's standard. That happens on every car. But as far as these go, not much actually goes wrong with them, and you can just run them into the ground and they will take all the abuse you give them. Now down to the actual driving feel of this car. Of course, it only weighs a ton. It's not got a lot of power, but the way it's set up with the 50-50 weight distribution, Mazda really dialed this car in from factory. Even without coilovers and it being lowered, they still handle incredibly well. Now I'm going to bring up for contention another car which some of you may be thinking could be a good competitor, and that is the BMW E46, which is widely regarded as one of the best driving cars of all time. But for now, we're not talking about the M3, we're just talking about the fairly base spec or maybe even the M Sport. So I own a BMW 323 Ci and I love that car. It's a great daily, it's so comfy, but it doesn't feel as agile as this. This just wants to jump around and be slung around corners, whereas the E46, yes, it sticks in the corners, but it doesn't give you the raw driving feel that this car does. And obviously, that main difference is power to weight. Now, the E46, it does have 170 horsepower, whereas this model only has 110. But the E46 weighs 1,400 kilos. So for that 60 horsepower increase, you have a 400 kilo weight difference. And the lightness of this car just makes it so fun to drive, and you can just sling it into any corner and it will stick. And now, of course, with these cars, you can get them with multiple different suspension setups from factory. This is just the bog standard suspension. Obviously, when I got it, it was the bog standard suspension and an open diff. Whereas from factory, if you get something such as the Icon Edition like I used to own, it comes with uprated anti-roll bars, Bilstein suspension as standard, also coming with an LSD. Now, going on to the LSD front, there are multiple different types of LSDs which Mazda actually offered with the MX5. There's a variable LSD, a Fuji, and a Torsen. And then, of course, you've got the open diff. So if you've got the top spec MX5, the handling ability of that car out of the box was incredible. And that was reflected through driving my 1.8 Icon Edition. Now moving on to our final pointer, which is the mods on this car, the aftermarket availability, which I would argue I would say this has more modification potential than a Honda Civic. There is so much aftermarket support for these cars. You can modify every square millimeter of this car. For example, we will go from front to back with this. Just something as simple as a side mount plate bracket. Costs 20 quid and it completely differentiates the front of the car. I mean, you just look at those, it doesn't look as good, but then Liam's got his on, I've got mine on, makes a hell of a difference. And of course, down here, you have, this is a Rep GV lip. Now, I prefer the Rep lip because the real one is made out of fiberglass. This is made out of, I believe, polyurethane, which bends. So if I hit a speed bump, it basically takes all the impact out of it. I've hit the speed bump quite a few times in this car, and all that is really to show is a few scuffs underneath because it bends, it doesn't crack, whereas if it was fiberglass, it would crack. Now moving swiftly on, we have the clear reflectors front and back. I picked these up off Marketplace for like £20. Brand new, a set is about 50. Into the engine bay, we have a polished rocker cover, polished intake manifold. I did these by myself. It just took a bit of elbow grease and probably about a week of having an hour on it each night, and it came out just perfect. Of course, all the blue silicone hoses, the R-Theory billet aluminium rocker cover cap. What else is there? The HT lead, the massive intake. This was £80. The The coolant hoses were 90, that was 55, they were 20, and that's about it for the engine bay. But of course, you don't have to get them in blue like me because it's an MX5, because there's that aftermarket support. Companies offer these in a whole range of different colours. And of course, 4x100 bolt pattern, one of the most common bolt patterns out there for small wheels. So the aftermarket support when it comes to wheels is almost as much as 5x114.3, which is what a lot of the big JDM cars use. And of course, suspension. I have Meister R Sportive coilovers. You could stick with something standard and have monster truck fitment, or you could get a set of BC Racing coilovers like Liam has. Or just put some lowering springs on it, and the range of suspension modifications is incredible. You can do the anti-roll bars, the bushes, you can poly bush it. There's just so much aftermarket support with the suspension of these cars just to tighten it up even more. Now, we can't forget these side repeaters. They were like £10 off of eBay. The valve caps, that doesn't apply to MX5s. You can get that for every car. But also roll bars. These are just style bars, but you can get multiple different types of roll bars, roll cages, door bars, literally anything for if this car flips upside down, you're not going to be crushed, which with style bars, I currently am. So I do need to sort that out. And of course, ignore how dirty the car is. We have the Mazda Speed replica side skirts and the Mazda Speed rear spats. Got these off of a guy off Marketplace for like £200, can't complain. And then we come on to the RX-7 spoiler, which everyone loves about this car, and everyone is asking, where did I get it from? Is it real? How do I do it myself? Well, this isn't really meant for an MX-5, but it works so well. And I do believe there are places now that advertise it as an MX5 spoiler, which is just perfect. So you can go and pick one up today. Now, the clear rear lights. You can get completely clear lenses. They are a bit dirty at the minute, but you can get completely clear lenses, as I've got these red lenses in here. At some point, I do want to split these apart and take the red lenses out. But like I say, more aftermarket support. And even when it comes to front lights on vehicles, like Liam's down there, he's got some aftermarket halos for his, whereas I've just stuck with the standard ones. And of course, exhaust. There is so much support exhaust-wise. There's hundreds of different brands, and that makes me remember you can get turbo kits, you can get supercharger kits, you can get throttle bodies for these cars. You can do anything internally to this engine, and these just love boost. These will sit boosted happily between about 220 to 250, and they will just love the abuse all day long. They won't go wrong on you unless you somehow mess something up when doing it yourself, which is why, if you've not got the skills, I'd recommend taking it to a garage to have it done. But once again, the aftermarket support is incredible for these cars. Now, of course, it's not always perfect with these cars. They do have their issues. For example, the rust. Now, due to my car being low mileage, it's fairly rust-free. But Liam's car over there, you can practically push your fist through the sill because of how rotten it is. And of course, welding work isn't cheap. So if you find yourself having bought a rusty MX5, just for the sills, you could be looking at about £1,000 per side. Chassis rails, they tend to be in the £300 to £400 range for each side. Some companies do 600 for the pair. Now, you will notice that a lot of people that take the piss out of MX5s online, the only thing they make fun of is the rust, because the rest of the car is just so perfect and the recipe was perfected for years that they can't pick up on anything else, because there simply isn't anything else to pick up on. They are such an amazing car, and unfortunately it's just the rust that lets them down. We won't talk about the fact that everyone gets called gay in a hairdresser either, but that's people. That's about the people. That's not about the car. Now, the only other thing that really lets these cars down is the price of original Mazda parts. Let's take, for example, hardtops. Hardtops, you could pick them up relatively cheap a few years ago. Now, one of these will run you anywhere from 500 to even 800, I've seen some listed at. So, I mean, just these two cars, it's over £1,000 worth in just a bit of fiberglass. And of course, if you want one of the decent mohair soft tops, they're like £300 by themselves. Standard soft top you can get for about £100. But the mohair ones, they're expensive as well, almost as expensive as a hard top, which just seems daft. And now another thing is the gearboxes. The 5-speeds, cheap as chips, you can get them for £50. But the 6-speed, gosh, they're expensive nowadays. People just charging a fortune because they're rarer options and obviously more desirable for certain applications such as turboing, but they're just so extortionate nowadays. And the same is with the LSDs. LSDs are like £300 upwards, and that's just for the diff. That's before changing your drive shafts and everything else. So when you're buying an MX5, you really want to look out for to make sure it's got no rust. And if you can secure one that has a hardtop, has an LSD, I prefer the 5-speed over the 6-speed box. It's a very common opinion amongst MX5 owners. But if you can get a fairly top spec MX5 for a decent price without any rot, go for it because you will love the car. And if you ever sell it one day, I've never not heard an MX5 owner say they don't regret selling an MX5. Now, of course, if you need any advice, information when it comes to buying an MX5, feel free to drop me a message. I'll try and help you out as best as I can. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Max's Garage's January of Madness. And hopefully I will see you in tomorrow's video.